when you actually can fight over regions. I'm going to do it later on today, actually. I will be so obnoxious American style. It's going to be insane. But you get to do it here right now. I'll take this guy in the top left for Team Marati. He is Goblin.
His opponent in the bottom right, playing red, as red, and in the with playing Protoss, is DnS. And I think one of the better game plans for DnS here is to go the extra mile with the scouting. I like that he's already sending a probe out, unless that were to be for a proxy, in which case we would have the absolute turntables from what I thought was going to happen. But yeah, yesterday we saw some very solid double gateway, sentry plus stalker opener with which you can just scout so early. The thing is, Goblin, he knows about this being a possibility, so there's still a lot of things he can do to try and trick DnS into thinking that something different is happening. I love what you said as well, like seeing in Protoss Mirror is not believing, because there's always more to the story.
There always is. In this case, I wouldn't be surprised if DNS's particularly fast scout was to go ahead and block any attempt at a faster natural. Goblin is one of the Protoss players alongside MaxPax, basically, who will try and fast expand on a Romanticide, so a one gateway expand, and then either a Robo or Stargate or both his way to victory. If this was this is exactly the map I was thinking of when I was saying that like MaxPax actually does have that very unique style on individual maps. I think Goblin can as well. But, you know, it's not that. It's actually just going to be a more typical PvP opener, 2 gateways for both parties, then also a fake proxy pylon, something that just kind of play into what you would think Goblin would do. So DNS, you know, maybe if this was Showtime, you'd be like, oh, that pylon's not doing anything, I don't have to worry, but it's Goblin, so you gotta worry about what that second pylon's doing.
Yeah, right now if you're DNS, you're getting a little paranoid for sure. He scouted the main base of Goblin, saw that there was no second pylon, so he's gonna get out on the map, and I think he's gonna find that second pylon, which would tell him this was a fake for the most part. And I think to play it safe, he can just clear out the rest of the map at the bottom, see that there is not a second pylon follow-up. That's the thing, you cannot see the whole map at all times. DNS actually opened double Stalker into double Sentry here, so his scouts with the hallucinated Phoenix won't be super fast. But I guess this makes him safer in the first place to have 2 Stalkers first, in case there were Adepts headed his way, which there aren't.
Yeah. 2 Stalkers is a fantastic opener against someone who actually is, you know, being aggressive, then they can be used defensively, or someone who is trying to proxy, because 2 Stalkers can actually carry some weight with their damage, whereas, you know, trying to send out sentries or adepts to go kill a building is always a little funny looking. But yeah, the downside is that you don't get a whole lot of scouting. You don't get the adepts over across the map that can try and bust into the main base or see the Nexus timing. You don't get a fast sentry like with a Stalker sentry opener that hallucinates really well timed, so that you can start a shield battery in your mineral line and then cancel it as soon as you say, okay, yeah, it wasn't a Stargate opener. So that's what creates a little bit of this awkwardness. That's you know, some of the reason why this proxy pylon being put down but not used can be effective, and also why I think Goblin went for a 1 base Stargate. So he is still kind of committing more to the 1 base, right, than DNS is, but not a whole ton. And he's actually living up to his reputation right now. Not even an Oracle coming out of this, but just right in the Phoenix.
I mean, he's rocking the Raleigh portraits in game, so probably it wasn't even a decision that he could make himself. He was just forced into the Phoenixes at this point. But I like DNS's position. Earlier, second Nexus, he's corner boosting out probes actually right now instead of the Blink. And if you can head into Blink this quickly and build up a good Stalker count, you're going to be able to do really well against Phoenix tech. But these move outs, this is what's a little scary here. There is a shield battery at the expansion, and those sentries, they've been building up on energy. So he's going to have some Guardian shield, at least one, to work with.
Well, that might be what's picked off first and foremost by these Phoenix. They want the sentries because the sentries die the fastest and are also the most expensive. Paul's going to take away that Guardian shield, like you were saying. Actually distracts the army so he can grab the shield battery. Oh, that's a nice play. No second shield battery to save it, but then DNS at least using his force fields to trap these Stalkers in. As 3 more of his Stalkers come down in the natural, Goblin has taken off more than he could actually chew. And that plan did not really work out much at all.
Yeah, 10 walkers ahead now for DNS. This is a massive lead that he's gained. He starts a Forge immediately now that he knows he's pretty much safe. And because he has Blink about to finish, and some of the Graviton Beam were already used, He's like, okay, well, I can move out. You don't have enough Phoenixes to deal with this. The Phoenixes, though, are going to step in and get rid of those sentries, as Blink is not quite done yet. Not much chasing potential for DnS, but I guess he has enough Stalkers that it's super scary to actually move in with the Phoenixes to try and pick them up.
Yeah, it's not knowing exactly when Blink was going to finish either. I mean, he already got kind of reprimanded once before with sizing up his opponent incorrectly, so little hesitation makes sense. And DnS is going to play this about as perfectly as he really can. I mean, he slaps the push away, just makes it look really silly, holds on to a substantial probe lead, immediately grabs a third Nexus too, which of course Phoenix can't do anything about, while continuing to beef up his Stalker count. The only thing that DnS really had to pause to deal with everything that he's dealt with was the Forge. You know, the Forge would have been faster if Goblin was also doing Twilight Council Forge, right? But he delayed it, he held on to the resources, turned them into Stalkers, and those Stalkers gave him this fantastic lead. I'm actually really struggling to see how Goblin brings himself out of this one.
Yeah, this is super well executed by DnS to rush that third base like this, knowing that he was ahead on the worker count. Like, you can just kind of guess. Of course, remember, we see everything they don't necessarily, so you have to make those reads on the fly during the game. And now that he's going into charge, the question is, what's the long-term game plan? Is he fine with the game slowing down a little bit, still playing defensive, or does he want to try and use his leads to go for one of those timings that maybe he could go for, you know, with the Warp Prism and a lot of Zealots being warped in on the other side of the map?
I think he absolutely could hit a +1 attack, and he might win the game actually off of that, but a safer thing to do would be to wait for that +2, including the Archons, right? He might actually go ahead and hit even without having +2 done, because he is the one that, despite not having the Phoenix, is really in the control of the situation. Goblin's Phoenix have been borderline useless. They haven't really done anything at all, and they can't. The Stalker count's grown too much, so they're just patrolling back at home, which is very much so not what you want to do with Phoenix. You want to try and be harassing and getting the read on the situation. And now I think he's just hoping that DnS does overcommit somehow and move into a mistake. And I just don't see DnS making that big of a mistake. You know, he's doing everything right so far.
Yeah, I guess the best option is always to scout, see what the opponent's up to, and then you can react accordingly. DnS just scouted the third base, saw that he just finished and was only now getting saturated. I love the Stalker placement, by the way, that he had, where he was putting them like a little bit on the left of the middle line at the expansion, because then if Phoenix is sometimes flying, they might think, oh, there's no Stalkers nearby, we can pick off some probes. But if that happens, those Phoenixes would have died very quickly. So it's a great read by Goblin to realize that there is not enough Stalkers, that it's too risky to fly those Phoenixes in, and instead it's better to keep them alive. And Goblin's playing kind of scared right now. He's building up a bit of a wall. He's worried about that timing we talked about with Zealots and possible Archons. DnS is just happy to take a fourth much earlier. And I guess the macro game just keeps on going for now.
I think, yeah, man, I want to believe in Goblin's ability to turtle, but you know, you don't go into siege units very quickly. I mean, technically Disruptors could have made their way out, but that's not Goblin's plan. Goblin's plan is actually go into Tempest, or Carriers rather, Fleet Beacon is on the way as his Phoenix try and do something. But yeah, unlike, you know, a TVT where tanks can kind of cover a large difference in supply or even a compositional difference, the same can't be said about PvP, where charge lots running in on top of the double pumped Immortals that Goblin went for would actually kind of negate the Immortals. Like, it actually can happen if the setup is that perfect. These Phoenixes did just grab 12 probes, so it's worth knowing that they finally have done a good sizable damage to the economy, but maybe now they're not really that useful against the army. The Stalker count's still pretty good. Archons are involved. It's more about the ground army that Goblin has, which is, you know, it almost looks like pure Immortal. It's so small, and that's where Zealots are going to obliterate them.
And that's what the wall is here for, really, to just buy enough time for this army to really kick in. The Zealots, if they cannot get through, like, there's no way you can fight here if you're DnS. So the goal for DnS might be to prevent Goblin endlessly from taking a fourth base, but Goblin doesn't really want a fourth base. He just want to build up an army that will be able to compete with carriers against mostly gateway units, actually uniquely gateway units right now from DnS. And that gateway out on the map as well, that was like the final tell. Like, obviously he saw the army, but he also saw that gate there. He's like, okay, well, this guy wants to play aggressive. Just have to camp and play safe. So he's adding a ton of cannons and shield batteries here on this third base right now.
That's where it's about to be hit. Pylon sees the incoming attack. It's not really a big surprise to see DnS try a different angle. Now the wall is coming up on the right side. It's not a very healthy one, and the wall was ever replaced on the left, so some Zealots are going to get through. DnS looking for the killing blow, up 60 supply. Phoenixes are helping against the charge lots right now, but for how long can they really help? This is where Archons would be brilliant to have for Goblin, but instead he has Immortals. He has a couple of carriers trying to come out, but already losing so many probes, blinking on top of the carriers even. Goblin barely, no, he does lose the one carrier, but even with 2 carriers, would that really have been enough? I'm not so sure. DnS is forced to retreat just to build up more Archons, just to build up more charge lots, but definitely is taking this game. This is too much damage for Goblin to take.
Yeah, DnS was on +2 attack upgrade against 0-0 for almost the entirety of this fight, and his units were just way more effective. That's gonna be it for game 1 here. DnS doing exactly what I thought he was gonna do, playing solids, standards, scouting enough, making sure he doesn't take any damage early on, and then just getting ahead and winning.
DnS played that almost perfectly from start to finish. From the opening, taking it as seriously as needed, which was really not that serious. You know, he went through Stalkers, realized it was a fake pylon, no actual proxy, goes into a couple of sentries, then handles that kind of weird timing that sometimes can get a Protoss player who's playing greedy. He handles that perfectly, and then doesn't make any mistakes from that point. Doesn't overextend against Phoenix, which I think is a real trap of Phoenix, actually, is that you're like, oh, Phoenix can't be that important, and then you try and chase after him and the Stalkers get lifted. DnS played a really, really pretty PvP right there. Goblin was behind from basically the start, and I want to see that. I want to see different. I want to see actually like what happens when these guys start off on even footing. Because, you know, I did choose Goblin to win, so there's a little bit of that going in. But it's also that Goblin did win a couple of their past series, so I would have expected a bit more of a fight than what was shown in game 1.
I like how Sue said that she was gonna be consistent and pick the same as you. Because all I was thinking is how you guys gonna be consistently wrong so far today if that happens, and if DnS is able to win here. But yeah, that looked very convincing. Goblin, perhaps he shouldn't go for a fake, just go for a proxy, place it well enough that perhaps he doesn't get scouted. I mean, you just have to clear so much of the map. If you're DnS, like it's a nightmare, right? Like he was clearing the bottom left-hand side, but what if he was on the right side, right? So it can be kind of hit or miss, though, that's the thing. And it seems like a lot of players, they've become so good at this stage that they're much harder to cheese than it used to be possible. But I saw the smile on your face when you were asked, you know, like is Mirror a matchup in which, you know, you can cheese and do proxy? And you're like, that's my cellular. And it's like, yes, actually, that's one of the better matchups to try and do something like that.
It still is. I mean, it's not where it used to be like 2 years ago, was it? When it was nothing but proxy versus proxy versus proxy. But we've had even a return of the 1-base 3-gate robo. Actually, it's been happening a couple times on this map, Jagannatha. Maybe Goblin can bring it in here in game number 2 to try and get a point on the board. In the top right of the map, we have ourselves Team Roddy's Goblin.
His opponent in the reds, the Frenchman, DnS.
Yeah, you know, the previous 2 series these guys have played, it was all Goblin, but then again, it was also the end of last season, like October. So it's been, you know, 7 months. It's a casual amount of time to have a difference in skill. And I do think DnS has been playing very well in this group. I mean, he's really starting to shine as much as I would kind of talk about him in these open cups, and he wouldn't really do as well as once expected. Decides to really bring it for DreamHack group stage, and that's a beautiful time to bring it. I mean, if he wins this, especially, he has secured his spot into the actual bracket. But even if he doesn't win this, if Goblin turns it around, he still has a very, very strong chance.
Yeah, whereas Goblin being 5th right now in this group, and with 4 players being 2 and 3, he really needs to pick up that win. But yeah, DnS 4-1, so if he wins this, he's 5-1, and he's already played Raynor. That was the one series that he lost. And, supposedly the hardest matchup by far here in this group. So DnS is the one proxying a pylon now on the map right now, which Goblin will realize as he clears out this entire main base.
Mm-hmm. Can't really hide it, but you can hide the pylon. You can hide what's going on in the pylon. In this case, it is going to be a second gateway So, funnily enough, I was talking about the 1-base build. I was attributing it to Goblin. It is DNS who's going to take this 1-0 lead and then try and just kind of nip the series in the bud, right? Just if you can get an easy peasy second win, then there you go. You're done. You can now feel really confident about your group stage. But it does depend a little bit on how Goblin is able to either find this pylon or just, kind of predict what's going on. So far, not going to find the pylon.
And I think Goblin knows that something's out on the map, not just because the second pylon was missing, but also he put his probe on patrol next to the 2 gateways, and he saw that only one of the gateway started a unit for a moment. Mm-hmm. So then he's like, where did all those minerals and gas go? Probably into something out on the map. So I really believe that he picked up on that. Obviously, those players, they know exactly when the first 2 units come out, so he was able to get out of there before that. And yeah, he cleared out close to the entire map. By now spotted the proxy gateway, which tells him this is a 3 gateway rush, usually with stalkers. So now all he has to do is get ready. You don't want to get a nexus against this very early, but DNS, knowing that he's been scouted, is actually going to expo earlier than Goblin.
It's a weird thing about PvP. It's the other matchup. It feels like, if you've been found out, if your attack doesn't work, you're supposed to be behind. But I guess the power of contains, it's just, and how difficult it can be for Protoss to really shift gears from their initial plan. Yeah, an attack like this not doing anything can still end up giving you a lead if you're able to push them back into their high ground, or simply put, if you're just able to get them to respond. Maybe Goblin is going to do a great defense with a shield battery and a couple of Void Rays. That's great, but then offensively, Void Rays don't hold much water until they're in a higher number. So for DNS, I don't think he can break this. But if he can actually propel his macro back at home, then he might still end up actually getting a lead.
And this little dance right here was beautiful. Both players hoping the opponent will overextend. Goblin, in this case, sitting next to the shield battery, and DNS trying to pull Goblin outside of that shield battery range. Not going to be happening, obviously. At least I don't think so. I hope not, because the game would end very abruptly if either of them made a mistake of engaging where they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. DNS is looking to power up to that one-shot potential by the looks of things. Like, he could have not warped in more. Okay, he stops warping in. So he could have not warped in the additional set of stalkers that he just did and would have gone for a faster Twilight Council, but only now is he starting to move on from this stage. So the stalkers, in the past, a bunch of stalkers might not have been that useful. Of course, right now with the blink meta, it is still going to be useful. Although right now, maybe they need to be recalled. Goblin with a couple of cheeky adepts getting in with a proxy pylon is actually doing a ton of damage. And that just kind of takes away DNS's chances to actually get ahead at all. He was still behind, and now he's even just further behind.
Yeah, having the shield battery and the 3rd Void Ray on the way made Goblin so confident that he was well defended back at home. And when you know the opponent's going to do a lockdown like this, a 2 adept counterattack, those guys, they slay probes pretty quickly. Yes, there was a shield battery in the main base, but none in the expo. And even if there is, they just one volley those probes. The Dark Shrine behind this is amazing. He's just anticipating that there will be a Twilight, most likely from Goblin, and no detection. And he's actually right. For now, if a Robo starts now, this would still be okay for Goblin, but it's not like he's getting an Oracle, so it's just purely no detection. Can Goblin realize what's happening? He shades an Adept inside of the main base of DNS, and the shade is going to go through, or he's going to see the Dark Shrine. This is huge. He can now get a Robo and become perfectly fine against this.
Yeah. I think Robo would be the safest play, but he could also just, add on that Blink, add on that Forge, and then just get an Oracle, especially now that he knows to be paying attention for the DT Shimmer, which will be coming out at the front of his base. DNS also doesn't have a Robo, so this is it's going to be maybe an attempt, 1 DT, and then okay, you got an Oracle, just kidding. But I guess the Dark Shrine now is going to be put in reserve, wait until later to actually use it, and then try and make up for what is still a bad spot for DNS. I think if he hadn't lost all his probes against the Adept, it wouldn't have been so bad. I think when he lost his probes, it would have been like 32 to 34, and that's not nearly as bad as it is right now, which is 7 probes down, 9 probes down actually. I can do math. And so this it's just like DNS had a chance to come back, but losing the probes, getting his Dark Shrine scouted, it's fallen farther and farther away, especially as Goblin gets his own Stalker army.
Yeah, those assimilators on the Expo are really late. I like how DNS, he realized that 2 adepts went into his expo earlier, so he's like, okay, there's a pylon down there. He went and looked for it, got rid of it, but Goblin, he left the probe out on the map. So then he made a backup pylon on the bottom right-hand side. He sent the probe back out at 4 o'clock, and he made another pylon there. So he's like, all right, go ahead, try and find all my pylons. There's too many for you to find them all. And now I guess that double Oracle, those have some real harass potential at the expansion, but Blink's about to finish for DNS.
Yeah, he might end up losing 1 or 2 of the Oracles if he were to dive. He decides not to, seeing that the Stalkers are already there. Now, 2 Oracles did just reveal themselves on this side of the map, so if DNS had warped in a cheeky DT, he could have tried something, but there's already cannons. Goblin is just not going to let anything slip past him. He knows he's got a really good lead, especially thanks to those adepts, and he's going to try and continue on with it. It's so worth noting that if it wasn't for the adepts, I mean, DNS has managed to claw his way back to an even supply. Imagine if the adepts didn't kill what was total like 10 probes.
Yeah, it just seems to be like very consistent with how he makes probes. He's always very, very quick, like doesn't really miss a bit. Just good mechanics overall, which obviously has rewarded him here in this group with a good score so far. But yeah, in this game, it seems like it's Goblin who's taking a bit of a lead, but that's being reduced right now for sure. I think you're onto something.
He had to respond to the 3-gate, which is what I was kind of getting into, is that it's kind of a weird matchup. The heavy-handed response that you kind of need to take against aggression can sometimes actually hinder you in the long run. It's kind of the idea of in any matchup, if you over-defend, you could actually put yourself in a worse position. But in PvP, you have to over-defend. You can't take it lightly. So, yeah, DNS, he's almost brought it back. I still think that Goblin is going to be able to win this one, but it looks like DNS is also having some trouble with his computer. We haven't felt anything on our side, so it seems like it might just be a very odd little blip, but it seems we're getting back into it. There we go. So next stage of PvP then, as this is not going to end super abruptly, is going to be Charge, Archon, and +2. And I think that's what we're kind of waiting for. I'm not even sure anyone's going to feel bold enough to go out on the map and really do a whole lot until then.
Yeah, things got really awkward. Like if you're Goblin here, you kind of have to be worried about DTs. A Prism could fly in at any time and then drop on top of your cannon, and then you'd be in big trouble. If you're DNS, you saw that there were Oracles. He didn't want to rush for cannons in his mineral lines. And even if he does, Oracles can still fly in and get a lot of kills. So they're both kind of being held hostage by the opponent's tech, at least for now. Like once, we're getting bigger armies and stuff, then we can start thinking about attacking. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just sat back to the 4th base and maybe even started going to some more Stargate planes, Stargate units there.
Goblin, I would not put it past him. For DNS, I think you might hold on to the Stargates until potentially a very, 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 very late game. I mean, we still have the potential of disruptors in a game like this. If they both decide that they can't actually win based off a +2 attack on a 3rd or 4th base, then that is when you see someone try and get to disruptors. It's just a dangerous thing to do anytime prior because of the amount of resources you have to invest. Then that's a very strong opportunity for the guy who doesn't go for disruptors. But yeah, if you're going to kind of stalemate here, then sure, get into those blasty boys. And that might happen, but it is Goblin who should feel the prerogative to push out. He feels like he's got a lead. He has had one, and that if he can actually push out and find DNS in a more awkward defensive situation, then he can pressure and push and maybe even win the game. I would say this is more just poking and prodding because he doesn't have a Warp Prism. I can't see him really committing to a push. But with the Void Rays, with the Oracles, maybe he can get some distraction. Maybe he can just go ahead and pop that 4th Nexus easy peasy. And I think that actually might be what happens. DNS has no idea this is on the way. He just saw it.
You could have set up some stasis trap as well. Maybe he was just worried about the Stalkers blinking in and sniping his Oracles. But yeah, that Nexus is going to be a cancel. Goblin is very far out. Like you said, he cannot reinforce into the fight except behind that pylon with slow warp-ins. But 2 stasis ward immediately behind his army, I guess. He was kind of baiting for DNS to overextend, to trap a lot of his army and then fight the rest. But DNS not going to fall for it.
Yeah, very clever. But you can see the shimmers of the stasis trap, so I'm thinking DNS was trying to pay attention. Goblin is going to force a fight. again, just to try and get that trap activated. He really wants a bunch of charge lots to run into it or all the stalkers to blink into it. But it can be a dangerous game to play when you aren't reinforcing as quick as your opponent. He's actually going to take the straight up engagement. He's feeling confident. He runs forward. The Archons and the Zealots, the stalkers try and get on top of the Void Rays, but don't actually kill any of them. And prismatically aligned, they are dealing so much damage. Goblin finds the opportunity and strikes right for the heart. Who needs a Warp Prism? He's got a 30 supply lead. He's got an upgrade lead, and he is going to be taking game 2 by the looks of it. DnS does have a couple of units looking to bother Goblin's 4th base, but will that be enough to make up for that huge loss of army?
Yeah, Goblin was the only one with a Guardian Shield for the majority of that fight. Dark Templars on the other side trying to snipe a Nexus, but Goblin, he had an Observer nearby. He's going to be able to defend against that and save that Nexus. And now that he's been put on notice about this happening, he can just get a cannon, a shield battery, be completely safe. Does he want to press the issue here? That's the big question, because DnS, it looks like he has a sizable army. And when you have an earlier 4th base like this, it might just be better to wait it out for a little bit. And when DnS finally starts mining for his own 4th base, that's when you attack.
Plus, you could actually just wait for your Warp Prism, which I think would absolutely seal the deal. So I agree with you, Todd. You can wait this out, buff up his army, get that +3 done, perhaps even, and have a Warp Prism a lot closer, a lot faster than those slow Warp Ins, which were just enough. You know, they still added a couple of Archons, and then he took the fight when he saw an opportunity, and he was absolutely correct to take that fight. DnS does live to fight another day, but it's hard to see how he wins with a supply deficit when they're both on almost the exact same unit composition.
Yeah, DnS only now started +3, so he's infinitely behind with this. His army is so Zealot heavy as well, which makes me kind of worried because there's so many Archons against him. Like, they're just going to evaporate, it feels like, and the fight should be pretty one-sided. Then again, you never really know, if he's able to set up a proper flank. Maybe if Goblin overextend and does a poor job with the engagement, things could get scary very quickly. You have to really set the concave in advance and not take the worst possible fight here for either player.
That's a very good point. I'm still with your initial point, though. 9 Archons against 37 Zealots. The Stalkers do blink in aggressively, putting their face right in the Zealots' blades, but then they back away, let the Archons do their jobs. Void Rays even still helping out, and Warp Prism still available. The Archons doing such a great job. All the Zealots have been depleted, and that without the Zealots, DnS doesn't really have a leg to stand on. More Zealots coming into the meat slaughter that is the Archon fire. And this might finally be it. Goblin playing a very nice game, kind of similar to what DnS did. He just read the situation correctly, played out the macro game, and now is going to be rewarded with a victory.
Yeah, and the reason Goblin had so many Archons against so many Zealots, by the way, is that he's been on 6 gases for a very long time. DnS, this entire game, has been on 4 gases. That translates into way more Archons, and apparently a very solid win here with the +3 against +2, still fighting it out here for Goblin with a big supply lead. DnS down to his last few forces. Immortals feeling useless against this army.
Yeah, I mean, they're, Mortals can sometimes be a bit helpful, powering away, firing against the Archons behind a Zealot line, but the Zealot line gets depleted almost instantly thanks to 9 Archons. That's what it's going to look like. So we have ourselves a tied series, and with that, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, it'll be game number 3. game number 3 will be on 2,000 atmospheres. I think you guys are going to have to get used to this order of maps, but we are at least getting a game 3. PvP has been giving us a bit of a one-sided matchup, I suppose, in each individual game. Someone gets ahead, they stay ahead, they choose the exact right moment to declare victory, and there you go. Maybe game 3 will finally give us the back and forth action that we know PvP can deliver. In the bottom left, we have the blue Protoss for Team Roddy. It is Goblin.
His opponents in the top right-hand side of the map, playing in the reds, it is DnS. DnS opting to be the aggressive one in the previous game didn't work out at all. Goblin realized there was a pylon being made out on the map, that there was a gateway being proxied, which he scouted, and he was probably thinking, are you serious right now? Like, you're trying to be aggressive against me? Knew exactly how to defend and then just got really far ahead.
The Adepts were really what cinched it, I think. Like, if it wasn't for the Adepts, I do believe there's more of a question, and I think if DnS was honestly the better player, then he would have recovered and maybe even taken the game, actually. Like, the 10 probes in total that they killed were rather important, even though, you know, we could sum up that game as like 3-gate failed. There are more, you know, complications than that. I am still surprised that DnS tried to be the aggressive one. Not because Goblin is like, you know, he's the aggressive one. He knows what to do if someone is aggressive to him. And more just so because Goblin is comfortable doing a 1-base Stargate. Like, that is actually what he did in the first game as well. So the second game, I would hope that it wouldn't have really a surprise that Goblin was to do one again. Obviously, especially because he scouted it was a proxy gateway, but even without it, he's shown a preference to it. So I'm not sure that type of build's gonna work out. I guess DnS was hoping Goblin was a little more cavalier with his defense. No early shield battery, for instance, means that the Void Ray actually does get target fired down. All right, sure, that happens, but didn't happen in that game. And now we have a third PvP where, honestly, again, anything can happen. But in this game, no proxy pylons, no shenanigans.
Yeah, that's the first. Perhaps a more standard game out of the two with nothing crazy aggressive in the start. We have 2 Stalkers being made on both sides as first units. Goblin really sticking around for a while as well, trying to get an extra scout. Might end up getting trapped here with the probe. He's just checking the back to see if there was a late building started, like a Stargate. DnS doesn't go for a pylon to trap that probe, but it doesn't need it. He's gonna be able to get rid of that. And I guess for Goblin, it's like almost like a small victory where he knows that there was no Stargate made at the back, and maybe that was a very important piece of information for him because he's getting his own Stargates, and that one wasn't spotted.
There you go. 3 times in a row, Goblin goes for an early Stargate. Not necessarily prompted, I think, in any of the games. It's just how he likes to play. So by ensuring that his opponent didn't go for his own equally timed Stargate and thus could maybe get his own Phoenix first, Goblin might try and actually push out an Oracle, which he hasn't done so far. First game was Phoenix, second game was Void Ray Defense. There we go, an Oracle is going to pop out. Now this is turning awkward because DnS actually is going for a 1-base, so Goblin cannot trust his first impression. DnS is adding on the 3rd gateway and the Robo. Not on Jagannatha, but on rather 2,000 atmospheres, but still, this has come back, and it is catching a lot of Protoss players off guard. It's just what happens. The meta comes and goes. When it comes back in, it's all about the surprise.
I wonder if DnS is going to get a shield battery in his middle line, because he's going to need that against the Oracle for sure here. The first one's moving out. There we go. Finally gets added. Not quite in the center. He kind of tried to keep that out of the way, but DnS being on 3 gateways here, he can just build up a scary Stalker count. Remember last game, it was the Void Ray that was also really scary in synergy with the shield battery. This time, there's not going to be that Void Ray. Instead, there is Oracles trying to counter-harass the economy of DnS.
Excellent choice from Goblin. He scouts no Nexus, immediately cancels the Oracle and Chrono Boosts that Void Ray, and he's going to try and Chrono Boost it, I guess, twice. Yep, he's going to have 2, and that's pretty important because the count of Stalkers is already very worrying. There's no second shield battery in the natural. There's one in the main for Goblin. They could rather have another one over here. The Oracle did do some damage, and this is pretty important because it's not like DnS really wants to replace workers. He's entirely all in on 1 base. He wants to be pumping as many Stalkers as possible. Has he got enough? The shield battery looking awfully vulnerable. Not going to go for it. It's going to one-shot down the Stalkers. Oh, actually misses that one. It goes to the Void Ray. Overcharge, however, is going to barely barely save it. Oh my god. Oh my god. Barely saves the Void Ray 3 times. And that is a real bummer for DNS. That one shot is so important, but now there's going to be 2 Void Rays.
Yeah, that War Prism kind of builds. I don't know if it was intentional. I guess it could be fragile to send it in there to pick up units, but you're supposed to dodge some of those volleys of the opponent's Stalkers while they're midair, ideally. It moves back in. Still a lot of energy on that one shield battery. Goblin, if he can hold here, is just so far ahead with expansion being up. I wouldn't be surprised if DNS just tapped out instantly, but he's still going for this attack. It feels like there's no transition potential for him.
I don't think there is. The next part is just being able to one-shot through the shield battery, which I think he's gotten up to again. The first, or the only Void Ray, I should say, no longer has prismatic alignments, but the Stalker numbers of Goblin are also growing. He did get that second shield battery and a second pylon, so no vulnerability there. Doesn't lose that Stalker. DNS maybe feeling this game fall through his fingers. The second Void Ray now here. Now both of them extremely healthy. That's a terrible sign for a guy who's only on Stalkers.
It feels like he needs to go for it. The more he waits, the worse this is gonna get here. Goblin could even pull probes, I guess, to help out. He has got a second backup shield battery a little bit behind this. Goblin can absolutely not move out. That would be the biggest mistake here, to actually engage into this in the open. He's playing it right. He's just turtling. He sees on the other side of the map there's still no second Nexus, and he probably feels very comfortable understanding that DNS is all in right now. There's a probe in the wall. Perfect by Goblin with the pylon.
Super well played. The Void Rays will deal with the Adepts as the shield battery is still trying to cover these Stalkers. The first one finally goes down, but that I think was something he was willing to give up. Now we have 3 Void Rays, still 1 shield battery. Overcharge, I gotta believe, is off cooldown. It is. So that's another safety feature there. Goblin's taking this as seriously as he should, just building another shield battery. Honestly, I think that's more just in case. I'm not even sure he actually needs it, but it might end up helping. 4th Void Ray already halfway done. DNS, he's gonna go for it. Doesn't grab the 1 Void Ray though, so it gets healed up. And man, I feel like that was maybe the last chance. Now we're on 4 Void Rays.
Yeah, DNS is being too patient with this. He needs to go for it. He's finally gonna go for it. Gets one of the Void Rays as another shield battery finishes. But yeah, there's a replacement Void Ray already there. Another one still being made from that one Stargate. The Oracle's back home. He didn't keep that on the other side to try and kill more probes.
Yeah, I guess it was becoming a little more hopeless rather. Stalker checks to make sure that the army has not moved back. You do want to be pretty on point with your scouting here. If they had moved back and you don't scout it for a minute, that's, a minute lost when you could be moving on. As a Forge does finally come down for Goblin. DNS, he's not going to get... What? Wait a minute. Did he just kill his own unit?
It happens to the best of us, Jess. Don't judge.
I'm not judging, but I am. That's a little concerned, all right? If he does that 1 or 2 more times, then I think DNS has got a shot, but hopefully he doesn't.
He wants to handicap. This is too easy for him. DNS actually expanding behind this is super interesting. I think he just understood this wasn't going to work. So he's like, well, instead of taking a fight, I just know I cannot win right now. I'm going to try and expand and pretend that I'm still all-inning, and because the Oracle's not there, there's a chance Goblin doesn't realize this is happening for a long time. Actually, he's sending out his Oracle right now again. Yeah, he's getting cannons right now. He's kind of overreacting. He should be fine with just pure units. I guess the sentry is also scary because of force fields. Yeah. With that many sentries, you could pop forward actually a lot of units away from the shield battery, away from the Void Rays. At least temporarily. Oracle does grab a couple more probes, is doing the scouting that you're talking about. And this is, really that scouting is just good so Goblin knows he can move on, which he was kind of already starting to do. Looks like that Forge was an initial defense against any DTs that might happen, which are fair. It happened last game, right? So he's got a cannon, a natural, and main. And then he also adds on that Twilight Council, and we'll move on to a more standard and dependable army because, yeah, Void Rays, they try to move out, and DNS actually has his own blink somehow and also has 30 Stalkers. Yeah, the Void Rays aren't nearly as great, so you do want to move on to your own blink. And that's what Goblin's doing. DNS still far behind in that department, just now getting a Twilight Council. Yeah, there's actually another full set of force fields here with those sentries, so it's like a proper long-term lockdown that we're seeing from DNS. Goblin, actually, this is totally worth. If you can only lose 1 Stalker to force this many force fields. Oh, DNS a little bit too quick on the trigger here with those force fields. Now I don't think he has enough to stay there, so he kind of has to run back home, which Goblin's finally happy that to have broken through, you know, that this lockdown. He can go into a third base easily.
Which I think he should. This is exactly what I was talking about. The chase can be a little suspicious. The void rays get worse if the stalkers can, you know, actually one-shot them because they're not near a shield battery anymore. Or two-shot them, I suppose, on the shield battery. So, okay. Goblin, you know, he kind of chases a little bit, but I like the safe call to return home. DNS has a warp prism, which I assume is going to be used for a little bit of harassment. And then, I guess he's got to get his own third. So, seeing that Goblin's taking his own third, DNS is either got to go for the all-in again, which I don't see him doing, or actually get his own third. And there we go. Probe's now on his way out.
Yeah, DnS getting supply blocked a little bit annoying right now as well. But upgrade-wise, it is going to be Goblin running the show with +1 already about to finish. And he already has the Twilight, so he can start that +2 immediately. And went straight into charge after Blink as well, so he's not really missing a bit with everything he needs to be getting right now. And feeling confident enough to move out. That Warp Prism pretty amazing to reinforce. That should be a pretty easy cancel on that third Nexus.
I think so. The Oracle just confirmed how big the army was at DNS and even kind of confirmed that Blink wasn't done. Otherwise, they probably would have chased after the Oracle. Blink is finishing, however. It's already done for Goblin. He's going to take this fight. Void Rays schematically aligned are dealing a ton of extra damage as DNS, even in his attempt to run back to the shield battery, loses like 3 or 4 stalkers right off the bat. An aggressive Blink forward as Goblin knows he's got this game and he's got this series. This is an excellent thing for Goblin to have, actually. He was in a fairly scary position in this group. By defeating DNS,